I'd like to do some clips and edits of an ICR podcast with Dr. Brian Thomas, the focus of which is Neanderthal man. But there are other things discussed which are relevant to the creation-evolution issue. Here's Dr. Thomas.
Dr. Brian Thomas. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Thomas.
Thrilled to be back.
Before we get into the specifics of what's going on here, what is a hominid? I mean, we hear that word thrown around. We're like, oh, early hominids, later hominids. Are humans hominids? What's a hominid?
It's an umbrella term. It's like humans plus the animals from which they evolved. Like that's that's how we describe a hominid.
That's confusing.
But notice that the very definition presumes and assumes evolutionary origins. But what if you went in and found that all the ape-like options were just apes and all the human-like options were just humans? Then you don't actually have any content in that bucket. You can have a bucket labeled, hominid, and then when you look in there and rummage around, it's just a bunch of, there's nothing in it. So
we actually have Adam or Apes, a presentation, we can link to it here,
where
you go through some of those, some of the hominids and show whether or not they're humans or apes.
Yeah, and in that presentation, I try to emphasize that this is not some biased creationist saying this has to be a human because that's the only option that fits my biblical worldview. This has to be an ape because that's the only option that fits my biblical worldview. I actually go through and quote from evolutionists who say this was an ape and evolutionists who say this was a human. And so we find for every supposed hominid, there's a debate. Every single one is contested in the literature among scientists. And that should be the main talking point. Not that there's a whole litany of hominids that demonstrate clearly and ad nauseum our connection to the animals, through evolution.